Welcome to your NIDO Wearthy walkthrough. I'm excited today as I sit amongst this environment that's been over a year in the process. Two brands coming together with the common mission of reaching more children and creating those childhood experiences that last and push through into adulthood. Today we'll be walking through the ecology of play, what the ecology of play is, the values of the ecology of play, because this walkthrough is all about handing the baton on to you. There's no point as designers and playmakers to have all of this theory, because you are the practitioner. You are the one on the front line, so to speak, and you are the ones making the difference within your relationship and within this environment. As beautiful the environment is behind me, I'm excited to give you the skills to expand on that and for this environment to grow not only in volume, but grow in opportunity for the children to explore and experience. Before we jump into the specifics, I want to encourage you to apply the lens of this environment is yours as much as the children's. What things can you bring in your passion, within your superpowers to really activate this space? Because the more imprint we can put on the space with our children and co-create it, the better it is for not only the children, but for you to get that fulfillment and joy that inspires you to be creative, to explore, and give yourself the margin to connect in those relationships. Because it's in relationships where we truly feel safe and we can truly feel confident to grow. As educators, when we think about play, a lot of our time, our default is to jump into, okay, where can I do setups? Where can I do provocations? I just want to encourage you to pause for a moment and think, how do I support this child in relationship? Because it's the children you work with that have different needs, different wants, different motivators, but it all starts with feeling safe and secure. To feel safe and secure, that needs to be a combination of relationship and environment combined. And that's why I'm so passionate about the ecology of play and really viewing that child as a key ingredient and actually a contributor to the environment, a creator, and so are you. So coming alongside your children hand in hand, not trying to push them outdoors or drag them outdoors, hand in hand, and I want to encourage you, it's about co-creating your space together. What are the interests of the child? And being confident with, let's enjoy the process and let's not make it about the outcome, because I want to remind you that if it's about the outcome, it's not play. Having the experience of being an educator, I know there's a lot to do. Cleaning, observations, rest time, food, transitioning, parents, there's so much to do. And we can actually get caught in a bit of a trap of the checklist and let's get through things. And it's about the outcome, not so much the process. And that's where a lot of friction comes from within our interactions with children. We're interested in getting to the end of our task, and children are more interested in getting into the task and getting their enjoyment from the process, not the outcome. When we co-create with children and come alongside them and let them lead, give yourself the permission to enjoy the process, not jump in and redirect and intentional teach, because we can easily fall into the trap of intentional outcomes. From a practical sense, we've got the environment to do the heavy lifting for you within that diversity. It gives the child the opportunity to move towards the types of activities they're most interested in. We don't know what that child's experienced at home. We don't know the type of morning they have. But if we have diversity of opportunity within an environment, that's meeting the children's needs through the environment. And that responsibility not falling on us solely to meet all children's needs. That's a big task, and I don't think as good as you are and amazing as you are, it's not achievable. So let the environment do the work for you. You'll notice within the designs, we've really concentrated on observation zones. Observation zones are a loading of certain types of play that match. You'll notice that we've got fast moving and transitioning play and the gross motor play separate to our small world play, which lends itself to the provocations around sensory and social. Let the environment do the work. Refer to the ecology of play diagram, refer to those icons in that area and set up your environment just to match those icons. You might have noticed that I used the phrase earlier around observation, not supervision. Our words we use are so important. For so many of us, when we think supervision, it's about directing, redirecting. We supervise inmates. We supervise at the beach to keep people safe. And as educators and caretakers of the future generations, we're unfortunately smothering a lot of children around their decision making and enabling them to keep themselves safe. So the attributes of supervision is keeping them safe, directing, and being the authority. Opposed to we change that language to observation, and it's observing the needs, observing the interactions, which marry perfectly into our learning cycles. So I want to encourage you, what are you observing in the children, and what can we prompt within the environment to support that exploration? I want to introduce you to a concept to really activate and create an imprint on your environment, and that's creating ecosystems for play. And this is a framework you can use to really activate and get the most out of your provocations and your setups in the morning. There's a few rules to keep in mind, and these are the same rules that we layer in to our designs. So on the bigger scale, we're designing this theory in, but this is a flexible practice that you can use every day to maximize the play value. Creating ecosystems of play aren't specific to having a built environment like this. It's the same theory for this as it is for your setups and provocations in the morning. For so many of us, we're stretched, we're coming in, we're short on ideas, we put down the mat, we plop out the blocks, we take a photo, and there's our setup for the day. Unfortunately, the environment a lot of the time doesn't support that use of the resource that we've put down. A lot of the time, it's in a transition zone, and it ends up those blocks or that provocation that you set up being transported with the child as they move through the space. There's friction between the prompt of the play and the environment to support the play type. And that's where we end up with a bit of confusion around play and a lot of mess. How do we get around that? Firstly, we've got to stay out of those transition zones. Where is that flow of traffic coming, and move away? To use this structure here as an example, you can see the flow and transition encourages the child to move through the space. As they step up, the environment offers the cue to assess my environment and change my behavior to suit the environment. As a child steps up, it's prompting them to slow down. You can achieve this by using screening, maybe some seats or a bench with a narrow entry point where the child actually has to square up and venture into the space. That's going to slow them down. Even if we have a screen on a screen so they can physically weave into a space, and then with these narrow entry points that you see here and here, it's at this threshold that the child can see that little ecosystem. They see the play type, they see the match between the environment and the play prompt that you've set up here. Let's look for contrast in those prompts as well. Opposed to just setting up the fairy village, let's get some rocks in there, some things that don't make sense. There's a puzzle to be solved. But what I will encourage you, there's a match, there's a small world, it's an intricate, there's the availability for that social interaction. We're not moving through the space, we're encouraging the children that want to move through the space to not move through the middle and interrupt everyone else. So 3 rules to keep in mind: narrow entry points. Number 2, keep out of the transition zones and always match the type of resource and a little bit of contrast to that little environment. This is an example of where your environment is the third teacher. I've heard that saying for years, and I'm like, do people actually consider what that means, or it's kind of a default and say, well, it's up to nature to do it? No, we arrange and coordinate these little ecosystems to support that synergistic relationship between the child and their environment. You don't have to be there redirecting. You don't have to be there behavioral managing or coordinating. The environment is offering the prompt, all the rules and the definition of the type of play that's happening in this area for you. So you can step back and observe and not feel like you have to be in and supervise. As I've mentioned so many times, it's about getting the environment to do the work for you. That's why I love the use of gates and barriers. You don't have to build one, you can improvise using walls of pot plants to define these zones. I love to extend on any classroom opportunity with walls of pot plants or screening panels to give you the confidence to open those doors and for that indoor-outdoor flow to happen. Think about how can I activate an extension of the room using that screening. From a practical standpoint, you might be in that position of you're dealing with increased numbers of children and the ratio is not quite right. Use your screening and barriers as an observation zone. Say, we are within this area at this point. And it also doesn't give you the pressure to feel like you have to set up all these spaces before any children are here. Co-create the space with the children at the start of the day. Use your barriers to say, what can we create together in this area? And just focus on that. As the numbers increase with the children and you have that better ratio of your co-educators, encourage them to activate the next space with the children. So you're expanding and leapfrogging each other within your setups. It's not coming down to that responsibility of one person. You're going to end up with better ecosystems of play because the children are the contributors. They're combining within relationship with environment. And when it comes to the end of the day, use the same practice in reverse. Start at one end and pack away or reset the playground as the ratio changes throughout the afternoon and more children are leaving to go home for the day. I want to take a moment to talk to you about language and how important it is. Language defines who we are, it defines our identity. And it's within early childhood that we have an opportunity to build those building blocks of relationship, building blocks of identity. I want to encourage you to come alongside children once again and use language to support them and give them the information they need to make informed decisions for themselves. I'm not saying it's a free-for-all and children get to do what they want. Quite the opposite. Children need clear boundaries. Your decision making is between here and here. Things like you can't do it yet. You have to earn the right to engage in certain elements and certain types of play within certain social interactions. And it's our responsibility to define what that looks like. I want to encourage you to be specific in your language. Give them the information they need. Saying being careful does not help. It doesn't inform them about what's happening in the environment. The rocks are slippery when they're wet. That branch does not hold your weight. Can you hear your friend asking you to do this? At this point, you can refer to the language posters and the language references resources that Wearthy supplied. They're broken into two categories: problem solving and growing awareness. We all know children learn through their senses, so give them the information based on their senses. Can you feel that rock wobble when you stand on it? Can you see your friend trying to get past? Make it tangible and real. Don't give abstract ideas. Don't ask a child of a young age to reflect on their feelings or ask, how would you like it? It's a really hard concept to grasp. In reference to keeping children safe, we want them to explore and experience and manage their own levels of risk. We have a responsibility to eliminate hazard from the environment. As you observe the children in the space, don't be looking for those elements or prompts within the environment that you have to be assessing for safety. It's the variable of the behaviour of the child that we have to be aware of. This is where the strength in relationship comes in, knowing that child's needs, knowing that child's personality, and being able to step in, redirecting or stopping the behaviour to keep that child safe. As we talk about how important it is to consider our own language, I'll take this opportunity to talk about the language of children. Their behaviour is their language. I want you to put this seed of thought in the back of your mind and let it germinate, that environment creates behaviour and behaviour is the language of children. So what is the behaviour telling you about that child's needs? What are you observing about that child's behaviour and how do I best support that? When we see an emotional response of angry, confused and upset, what we're seeing is we're seeing the symptom of the relationship and environment. So let's backtrack and say, let's assess the cause of this emotional response. At this point in time, I would love to make a declaration that you eliminate the word tantrum and meltdown from your vocabulary. If you were having a challenging day and you were upset and your partner walks in for the day and you say, having another tantrum, stop being silly, I am sure that you would not be so accommodating if your partner spoke to you that way. It always surprises me how we feel confident to undermine and discredit the experience that children are having. So I encourage you, come alongside that child, meet them where they're at. It's going to take a power of the pause for you, because our emotional response is, I want to solve for this. And that's why we say stop. That's why we get up, because we're in that list taking, let's get through this mindset. I've never once seen a child being told, stop it, you're being silly, and instantly change their emotion to suit. And if all else fails, we see parents and caretakers even get to the level of threatening abandonment and saying, well, if you don't stop it, I'll leave you behind. All we're teaching children is a binary relationship with emotion. That's not how we teach emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is a scale from 1 to 10. We're asking children by saying, stop it, to be a 1. You're fine. They're at a 10. So we're not teaching the scale of everything in between. What does 1 and fine look like? Hang on, what does a 3 look like? What does a 7 look like? We can't teach emotional regulation or emotional intelligence with telling a child it's either you're good or you're not. Be specific, acknowledge their experience. I can see you are really upset. I know it seems trivial. I know it seems so simple. But one of our innate needs is to feel seen, is to feel supported. And that's where the superpower of the educator comes in. You have the opportunity to connect. You have the opportunity to see these children, for them to feel worthy. I'm a firm believer in the fact that the current generation of children are experiencing a childhood like no other. The children of this generation have never been so overstimulated and underdeveloped. And this is a great opportunity to think about the importance of incorporating sensory activation and sensory play, and being aware of their sensory absorption and even overwhelm coming into a space, and how we can use the environment to help us help them. Sensory learning moves beyond water, and as much as I love water play and what it means, and that depth and that flexibility of water and adding water to sand, I want to encourage you, it moves so much further beyond that. You might be in an environment where there's a lot of external environmental stimuli coming in. We have to consider the type of experience the child may have had within their family and the level of sensory input they're having. When we think of those elements that children can easily absorb through their senses, they're all going to tend to be natural. Our sand, our water, our trees, wood, natural elements. If a child's suffering from a bit of sensory overwhelm, and you can read that within knowing the child and their relationship, a useful prompt is to ask that child, where do they need to go to feel safe? And then secondly, having a space within your environment that they can use as a refuge. It might be tucked out of the way. I'm not talking going into rooms with sensory walls and lights and fiddle toys and everything. It might be just a space to reset and use as a refuge for so many children. You'll notice within our designs, we incorporate little nooks under forts. You'll notice within our designs, we offer a lot of screening to steer that transition away, so a child can use the space to meet their own needs. Another way to help a child manage their sensory overwhelm is maybe even getting them a win, an activity that they're passionate about, an activity that they're interested in, a connection with a friend that they really value. Maybe it's just a bit of quality time with you. This is where your skill as an educator comes in knowing your children's needs. And the best way to know your children's needs is to come alongside them once again and understand what they need and what they're prompting you within their behaviour. As you embark on your play journey and into this next season of the activation of the ecology of play, I want to encourage you that there's no more important time than now. The childhood habitat under threat, it's never been so important to activate these environments. We know childhood for so many is happening in these spaces, and it's up to us, and I feel an urgency and a responsibility to honour the childhood experience of future generations and make the most of the space we've got. I want you to take a moment, pause, get a cup of tea, and reflect on how are you going to activate your space? Where can you set up your little ecosystems of play? What language are you going to use? Activate the resources you've been supplied. Choose only 2 language phrases to use. It's overwhelm otherwise. Start small, and also collaborate with your team. Come to an agreement and honour those agreements. Changing habits is always awkward in the beginning. It can be a bit messy in the middle, but it's always beautiful at the end. And we don't need to do the growing. We don't need to do the learning for the children. All we have to do is to create a thriving environment for them to thrive equally. We've talked so much about the children and activation of the children's needs in this space, but I want to take a moment for you to think about your needs within the space. What are the things that fulfill you? Just as we look for the victories within a child's play, I want you to reflect on what are the victories you can get by bringing your passion into a space. You might be passionate about cooking, you might be passionate about sensory play, literacy, numeracy, physical literacy. Become the master of that and lead it. When we're passionate about things, that's where children are going to come alongside us and meet us where we're at. It's better for our well-being, and it's better for the children to see passion modelled. Because when we're passionate, that's when we truly engage with the process, not the outcome. When you're engaged with your passion, an hour goes in a minute. And I want you to activate these spaces where your days fly by. And a prompt of reflection is about these immersive relationships and connection that you had with children while you were doing what you're passionate about. Yes, we have a responsibility to keep children safe. Yes, we have a responsibility to adhere to the policies and procedures of our brand. But what I love about the early years is that we've got so much freedom within that to bring our own passion, to bring our own gifts into it. And I'm a true believer, and this is what excites me about the relationship and teamwork and play partners with NIDO, is I truly believe it's the early childhood sector where we're going to set up the future generations for success. These are the building blocks that they're going to take to school. These are the building blocks that they're going to establish in their character. And hopefully, the children that you engage with and have a relationship with reflect as adults on that person that believed in them, that person that saw them. Because we all have that one teacher, or maybe it was a relative, that we felt like they saw us for who we are. And I invite you to aim to be that person. Because when we have people that believe in us, it opens up the gateway for possibilities. It builds resilience. Well, someone believed in me, even in hard times. We can use that relationship as a refuge. And that's what resilience is about. And that's how we're going to set up the future generations to flourish. I'm excited to hand this baton of intent for future generations to you now. Remember, you're worthy of this space. The children are worthy of this space. And you're worthy to enjoy life and explore and experience as much as children.